Hello and welcome to Rule the Waves 3, playing as Japan, starting in 1890 on Super Large Plus. This is episode 2. Let's jump in. So, in episode 2, I wanted to talk about the 3 pillars to start with. In my opinion, Rule the Waves is built on 3 fundamental pillars, 3 systems that mesh together to create the whole, plus some additional systems or permutations or whatever, like mine warfare, like the officer system, that sort of thing. But primarily it's about the strategic layer, the tactical combat, and the ship design. In the previous episode, in episode 1, we focused on the strategic level, on how we could analyze the starting position, do a little bit of planning ahead, basically. So this is, of course, turn-based, 1 turn per month, and you have all of this building stuff going on. You have diplomacy, tension, you have the espionage, you have the research doctrine, all of those things going on in the strategic layer. But the strategic layer is only there to lead to combat. Sooner or later there will be war, or you can go on fleet exercises and fight yourself. And in the upcoming DLC that's supposed to land mid-2025, you will have the ability to sort of create your own scenarios or play historical scenarios. So you can just skip the strategic layer and jump right into the tactical combat part. But the tactical combat, that will come in a later episode when we finally get into a shooting war. But right now we shall focus on the ship design pillar. And this is the one that ties together the strategic layer and the tactical combat, in my opinion. You build ships in turn-based mode. It costs you money, it takes time, very closely integrated with research. Events can affect your ships, your commanders, your officers, your divisions, all that sort of stuff. So it's closer integrated with the strategic layer, but of course it's your ships, the ships you design or let the computer design for you, that's actually fighting the wars. So in my view, it's an essential part of the game, and a lot of the fun lies not only in mastering tactical combat and knowing how to work sort of the game mechanics of the strategic level, but also knowing how you can make ships that are visually pleasing, game mechanically effective, possibly also in line with the time period and maybe even the nation you're playing. So I'm pretty sure there are quite a few Japan players out there that really enjoy playing Japan, that are very into building ships that are visually and mechanically similar or identical to actual Imperial ships, or ships that you can look at and say, yeah, this could have evolved from the design lineage of the Yamamoto, for example. But it is the successor class built in 1945 after Japan had crushed the US Navy repeatedly, for example. So, this is going to be the focus on this episode, not in general, but specifically starting in 1890 and going forward. So when we talk about ship design, there are sort of 3 parts to it, I would say. Quick refits, those take 3 to or sometimes 4 months. It's a little bit more if you change sort of a 5-inch gun on a light cruiser main battery to a smaller number of 6-inch guns, for example, that will take 4 months. But it's still a pretty cheap and quick rebuild. Doing something more drastic, that's no longer a small refit, that's a full rebuild that can involve anything from changing out the engines, which is a pretty big deal on a warship, especially those that are heavily armored on the deck. I mean, you have to cut your ship open and pull away a few thousand tons of steel just to get access to the engine spaces. But I digress. It can be aircraft conversions. It can be many other things. For example, changing the number of shells for your main battery will actually take you 12 months because your magazine spaces are built into your barbettes at the very bottom below the waterline, really deep inside the ship, so you can't just knock out a wall and install a few extra ammo racks. Rebuilds are to be avoided, in my opinion, unless you know what you're doing, because they typically, well, the time aspect is one thing, but the cost is usually extremely high, and typically not worth it, but not always not worth it. So we will talk about when it can be worth it. But we will now focus on refits and then, of course, new builds. And that is, I like coming up with useful small refits. I also enjoy and have spent too much money and resources on rebuilds in many past games, just because I think it's great fun. See how long you can keep sort of a ship viable. But yeah. But new builds, that's of course the best. Then you get to incorporate all the new technologies, and that is a very core aspect of the game. This rapid evolution of technology. So by the time your ship hits the water, it's not obsolete, but it is on the verge of obsolescence. Or maybe it's obsolete. Depends on what kind of tech just hit the world. So that's the 3 pillars. That's just something that I keep inside my head. Or you can make sort of a little triangle of it, like the speed, firepower, armor triangle thing. Anyway, it's interconnected, and this is where the magic, I think, happens. Ruler Waves 3 has all of these. It has a functioning strategic level. It has good tactical combat. It has this ship design system that meshes together, and all the other bits and bobs that are tacked on or glued to it. And it's this totality that makes this so much better than any other game that tries to touch upon naval warfare. Now, let's get building, but before we jump into the game and do actual building, we need to think and plan and plot. So, like I touched upon just now, new builds are better than rebuilds. So if you can't build new ships, definitely go for new builds. Don't be trapped by that need to constantly update or completely rebuild your ships. Yes, you can make an old ship pretty good, but once it's getting long in the tooth, like 20 or more years, it starts to slowly become more and more expensive, and it quickly gets out of hand. So that 40-year-old battle cruiser that you are lugging around, not only has it cost you a lot to build, it has cost you even more to rebuild twice, and now it's pretty good. It's almost as good as a new ship, but it's sitting there costing you extra upkeep just because it's so damn old. So why did you keep all those ships that you built in the 1910s or 1920s? Why didn't you build a few battle cruisers with more modern technology in the mid-30s alongside your first real fleet carriers? That's an interesting question. Obsolescent ships with that little O tag next to them in the ship list, we'll see those soon enough. They just plain cost more to maintain. So unless there are destroyers, small destroyers or corvettes of some kind, you should absolutely consider just updating them. Not you don't need to do much. You just need to do a sort of a generic rebuild. Maybe add a few techs like a better fire control if you've gotten that, or something along those, a better radar or something, or nothing at all. You can rebuild a ship without actually changing anything. You just open for rebuild and save and rebuild it, and then you get rid of the obsolescent tag. It's going to cost you a little bit, but not too much, and in the long run you will save on it. Ships that are mothballed, yes, you can wait a little bit because their base upkeep has been reduced substantially, so it doesn't bite as hard. But active or reserve or even active ships on with the O tag, a battle cruiser, an old battle cruiser, 40-year-old battle cruiser that's gotten that O tag, not a great idea. Maybe you rebuilt it with modern diesel engines and high speed, and it's horrendous. So the more I play, the more convinced I am that you should build new. We will talk about scrapping old ships again later, but yeah, sooner or later you have to scrap. Not because you cannot keep stuff in mothball for a long time for just a token sum, but because when war breaks out, what are you going to do with those mothballed ships? Are you going to actually activate them? No, because they are going to cost you so much that you go broke in a few months. So they will just sit out the war in mothball. Maybe you can afford to activate them for a few turns as for their blockade value, but yeah, no. Sooner or later, it's better to scrap. But we can talk more about that in a later video once we must think about scrapping our legacy ships. Yeah, like I said, you think you want to do the rebuilds, but you probably don't. But sometimes you do, so we can talk more about that as well. And you should also keep in mind that even though you have some ships that are now completely outdated, that you do not want to waste money on, they can still do some good work, sort of in that transition phase when dreadnoughts and battlecruisers are coming into style. They are outperforming your pre-dreads and your old protected cruisers and armored cruisers by a huge margin. But you only have like a handful of these ships, and the same applies to the AI. So he has loads and loads of pre-dreadnoughts, he has old cruisers with worn out engines, that sort of thing. And those ships can actually do good service for quite a few years, even after you think that they are sort of wasted. But when that war ends, or when they truly become obsolete rather than obsolescent, you can and must scrap them. And a quick note about destroyers and what I call colonial gunboats, I guess. KEs, corvettes, or whatever you want to call them. They are so cheap that you can not only to keep around, but also to do full rebuilds on, that you can keep those. You can have some old destroyers coal-fired long after their battleship companions of the 1910s are gone from your fleet, still running on coal. Or you could do deep rebuilds. Everything is so cheap with these destroyers that you do not need to be so careful. And they will suffer gradual attrition as well. So, that's enough general talk. Now we will return to our actual fleet. You remember from the previous episode, we have 4 groups of ships. We have 1 battleship. It sounds very little, but every start I made with Japan on super large, that was either 1 or 2 battleships, just as often 1 as 2. I would have liked to have 2 because then we could have used them for something, but we only got the 1. Cannot scrap it yet, or I will lose like 2 prestige or something. can refit it. I had a look, and yeah, it's possible. It's a little bit expensive, but still a minor refit. But the problem is it's only one, so what am I going to do with it? So I will keep it mothballed and not rebuilt. If I have some free resources and I'm bored, I may do it, but I don't think I will. It's just there for the blockade value. Maybe we could bulge it and rebuild it. That would make it very slow, but sort of like a heavily armored and armed monitor that can just sit there and no one wants to approach it. Anyway, the armored cruisers can be rebuilt. Substantial upgrade to secondary and tertiary batteries. Or just a 3-month refit. Same with the light cruisers, although the smallest one will need a 4-month refit. The gunboats are not, or yeah, colonial cruisers or whatever. They can just go straight into mothball. No need to rebuild them. If you want to add some anti-sub stuff or minesweeping gear, later we may have to take off some equipment, but we can look at that when it becomes relevant. First up is the Izumi. It's a pretty good ship, but it's hampered by that 2-inch deck and lack of other armor. We'll rip out all the extra main battery turrets except the front and rear ones, replace it with 5 and 4-inch secondary and tertiaries. This will increase overall firepower and also flexibility of fire. It gives it options to fire on more than one target at a time, basically. I think that's a fair update. It's gonna cost 2,500, take only 3 months, so it's fine. Bulging it would, of course, allow us to keep the 6-inchers and also add in a ton of secondary and tertiary. But then you would have a 19-knot light cruiser, slower than many heavy cruisers of the day. So I didn't want to do that, but it is, if in your game you could do it. This one is a bit different. It takes 4 months and costs a little bit more for a smaller ship. That's because we rip out all the guns and replace them with a main battery of 1 fore-aft. And then we get batteries of 5-inch up to 8. Cannot have more or it's a cramped arrangement, but 12-inch. It's not quite as good because there is sort of a hidden rate of fire penalty on those tertiaries. So, well, maybe not as so hidden, but there is a penalty under the hood, so to speak. So, but it's pretty good anyway. And we also rip out some torpedo tubes. Yeah, I didn't mark that with red, but you can see that 2 tubes are gone, and it's noted here. But in total, that will give us 4 light cruisers with a lot of comparative amount of firepower. They are very bad on the defense, though, so yeah, it's they're gonna hurt if it. Finally, the Azama. Again, I rip out the fore and aft torpedo tubes and put in extra side tubes. I think that's more valuable. I would have kept the aft one as well if I had the tonnage. I don't. No. I sacrificed the secondary battery armor to basically cram in extra 6-inch guns. I go from 8 to 12, and then I go from just some 3-inch guns to 4-inch guns. Now, sacrificing that secondary battery armor is significant because it would give protection from 2 3-inch guns and to some extent 4-inch guns, and also against splinter damage, and of course having those 6-inch guns knocked out by just a 3-inch gun and having a fire started and that sort of thing. That's not fun, but it's either that or bulge. So You have to make some sacrifices. Should read 2 max. I'll fix that before uploading. And like I said, the Fuso, our single battleship. If we had 2, I would definitely put them on the list, but just 1, it feels quite pointless. But now, over to the more interesting stuff. We need to build a light cruiser, a new type of light cruiser, a standard cruiser of the 1890s. And this will be our first non-legacy ship, so it will be better, I hope, than the stuff we already have. So we will have 2 options. We can build it in Great Britain, like we have so many other ships. This will allow us to build up to the cap of 8,000 tons. In addition, we have inefficient or undeveloped shipbuilding industry. The UK is the opposite, so they have effective or efficient shipbuilding industry. So they build not only faster than us, but even faster. So there's actually a big difference in how long it takes to complete a ship in Japan and in Great Britain. So 8,000 ton ships are of course more capable than 6,000 ton ships. And in a few years, Great Britain may have better tech than us that gets included in these ships that we buy from them. But there is a caveat here, and that is our reliance on keeping tensions low with Great Britain. Shouldn't be too hard, but it can be stressful in the long run. If you build it at home, we are developing our shipbuilding industry. We talked about that before. We need to build at home to get rid of that undeveloped trait. It will take longer. We could have hidden flaws. It's going to be less capable, but it's also going to be cheaper both to build and to operate. So that is something. But I think for a bang for your buck, then it is probably better to just go for the most capable light cruiser that you can. Anyway, regardless of what we do, we will, the image on the right there is of the Great Britain version of the cruiser. So if we flip back, not that different, but it has more guns. It also has some additional protection. It's going to be normal, medium in range, freeboard and accommodation. Anything else is pointless. It needs to be 21 knots. 22 knots is impossible without too many sacrifices at this stage. But we can do reliable engines. That will significantly improve our ability to keep going at 21 knots or whatever. So, and it's much cheaper in tonnage than making a speedy 22 knot ship that would just break down anyway. And a 21 knot ship with reliable engines, I think also is a bit cheaper than a 22 knot ship. I mean, it's not perfect. If it sink, it sink, but it's not, you can't make it a bad ship and build it. We need to make it good. It's a protected cruiser, of course. It will have 3 or 4 inches on belt extended, 3 if we build it at home, 4 if we build it in Great Britain. We're dropping the deck to just 1 inch, no direct hit. So yeah, we could take splinter damage through the deck. It will happen occasionally, but not as often as you might think. Conning tower on turrets 4 inches, 2 inches on the turret tops, nothing on the secondary battery. Not because we don't want 1 or 2 inches, but because we can't make the tonnage. So another key design feature here is that we are in the 1890s, obviously. So we cannot hit anything. We cannot hit anything beyond 5,000 yards, and even 5,000 yards is going to be wildly inaccurate. So you need to basically shoot a lot to hope to hit anything, and even then you're not gonna hit a lot. So for a light cruiser, we are going with the 654 layout, pretty similar to the refits I just showed you. We could also go 765 on the 8,000 tonner. We'll look briefly on that as well. Torpedoes, I love torpedoes and I want to have 2 on each side and 1 aft, but at the moment they aren't that good. They are super slow and have almost no range. So yes, we will have torpedoes on everything, but we don't have to have the full 5. So those are the requirements laid out by whoever designed or makes specifications and requirements in the Imperial Japanese Navy. So here you have the 3 contenders. On the left, the homegrown option, 2 6-inch, 10 5-inch, 8 4-inch, 2 tubes. So firepower isn't all that much higher than in the refits we did, but armor protection is considerably better. The Great Britain version just takes this one step further. Since it's heavier, it can have a bigger secondary and tertiary battery, it can have a bigger main battery, it can have 5 torpedo tubes, and perhaps most importantly, it can rock a 4-inch belt extended. That is actually a pretty big upgrade over 3 inches. 3 inches is like, it can stop stuff. It will stop 3 inches, of course. It can also stop 4 and 5 at some ranges, but when it meets 6 inches, it's gonna struggle at the close ranges that we are fighting on. 4 inches can be penetrated if you get a little bit lucky, but it is considerably better than 3 inches on the belt there. And of course, you can also, just by looking at the image there, see that the middle ship has a lot more firepower. You can also see that it costs more, but not all that much more. So we can have like 4 of the smaller one for 3 of the bigger one. Now, an interesting development would be to just take the Japanese cruiser, the home-built one, and just bump up every caliber 1 step. But then we have to drop on the belt protection, because otherwise we get reclassified as a heavy cruiser. You cannot both have 4-inch belt and 7-inch guns. You can have 6-inch guns and a thicker belt, but you cannot have both. So the one on the right has the same level of protection as the one on the left, but far more firepower. 14 6-inch guns, that is pretty significant, but it has a tad bit less protection than it should have. So I would say the middle option is the better one. The right option is the more exciting one. But the winner is the one on the left. The weakest and least capable, the cheapest and least capable one. And of course, this is purely a political political decision. We have to face the realities. We have to keep improving local shipbuilding industries. Something about prestige and whatnot. So we are going to build this one. We also need a heavy cruiser, because the one we have is not capable at all. And this one basically has to be built in Great Britain for many of the same reasons, but basically we cannot build a heavy cruiser on 6,000 tons or 7 or 8. Yeah. So let's not go overboard. Let's follow the same design IDs as the 6,000 ton cruiser, just upscaled. A reasonable balance between capability and cost. In a few years, we can build a class similar to this at home. And while we wait for better techs to emerge as well. Again, normal medium for all stuff. We have to drop 1 knot to 20. and reliable, of course. Always reliable on those early vertical triple expansion. That's, well, that's perhaps a pet peeve of mine. It is way better protected on the belt, 6 inches. Enough to stop even 6-inch guns at point blank range. And many heavier hits at longer range. Deck protection, still weak, it's a cruiser. This narrow flat deck on belt instead of protected cruiser. It's a better but heavier armor scheme. 7 inches on the conning tower and the main turrets. 2 on the turret top. Nothing on the secondary batteries. Yes, I would love to have some armor on secondaries. I think that is worthwhile in this era where 3-4-inch guns are plentiful. But not on 10,000 ton, not while keeping all the other stuff going. No, double 8-inch guns. We have -1 quality in Great Britain, so that's great. 14 6-inch and a bunch of 6-inch in casemate, mostly just to keep it visually clean. I don't really understand where I would put all those non-casemated 5 inches. It would look stupid. And yeah, 2 on the side, 1 aft. Cost here is 1750, 21 months if built in Great Britain. And we also have a pre-dreadnought, a proper pre-dreadnought. Yeah, I know you can build sort of mini battleships to get good blockade value for very little money. But I don't think that's very exciting, so we're not going to do that. On normal medium, we need 19 knots and reliable. We'll let the ship stay relevant for quite some time. This ship could keep pace with almost all pre-dreadnoughts that are being built or will be built, and can remain relevant until the end of that era. Narrow flat deck on belt. There are some armor values, and this one gets 4-inch both on the upper belt and the secondary battery. Yeah, I know upper belt, there isn't, other than uptakes, there isn't a whole lot of interesting stuff behind upper belt, but it is still superstructure, so you can still get hit there, and things will do damage if they penetrate, right? Exploding shells, setting things on fire, that sort of thing. So it keeps your parts of your superstructure intact. Narrow is just a weight saving measure. I'd love to have normal flat deck on belt, but this is as good as it gets on 15. I also have the 16 kiloton design. That's basically identical, but even better protected. But 15,000 is the maximum Great Britain can build as of yet. So if we want to build it right away, this is the heaviest we can go. Again, 8-inch guns. I don't see any point installing anything heavier. That's just -2 trash. So let's avoid that. And again, 14 6-inch, 25-inch, and torpedoes side and aft. It's not that expensive compared to the heavy cruiser, but it will show up in way less battle situations, so lower priority than the cruiser. But that's the sort of pre-dreadnought, early pre-dreadnought I'd like to build. Just, I think it's mechanically sound. It is perhaps not the most efficient use of resources, but it's a ship that can do good service, and that Imperial Japanese Navy can feel reasonably proud of. That's really all the designs that I have looked at, because there are no destroyers, there are no other roles to be filled. I don't need any mini light cruisers or some of that stuff. So we start with 61 monies, or 61 million, let's call it that. credits or Japanese rising sun monies. The yearly budget is on super large plus plus 360 800 13 oh, 1 136,800 million. That's 133,000 and change from base resources and 3,600 from Hokkaido. Hokkaido is gonna stay at this level, could grow a little bit if our budget modifier increases, but basically it's never gonna go above much above 4,000 and could drop to 3,000. But this is going to grow quite a bit over time. The monthly budget is 11,400. Monthly balance with everything active is 5,600. Once the legacy ships clear the docks, it's 8,900. Can put some ships into reserve mothball, and we will experience economic growth. So we will have, I would say, at least 8,000 million to build from each month. So we could actually do quite a bit with that. Before we decide upon builds and jump into the game and actually do builds, we need to talk a little bit more about growth, economic growth. So we start with 7,400 base resources. That's not a whole lot, but at least initially we will grow about 250 resources per year. And that is, of course, multiplied by the budget modifier. And initially that budget modifier is 18, so will often be between 15 and 20 or around there for peacetime. So you can see that an increase of 250, that could equate to 5,000 extra in a year, and it adds up. Some nations grow faster and slower. Yes, US grows very quickly and will become the greatest power, bar none. Spain and China grow very slowly, but Japan, we start out small, but we grow really fast, faster than most, in fact. And curiously, even after 1918, we continue growing pretty quickly. So even without more reparations or extra colonies, we will eventually be the second strongest economy on the planet. So that's interesting to keep in mind. I did a little bit of testing, ran a few test years up from 1890 to 91, just to sort of see what you can expect. Not something I've really taken the time to do before, but in this example below here, in 1 year, I increased my budget modifier to 21, from 18 to 21. I also had some events, so I went from 136,800 to 170. But I also had a game where I was very close to 90, and my budget modifier was all the way down to 12. That was just from random events and some of my choices I have to stand by. But basically, your budget can go both ways. I hope it goes in this direction, but you never know with the waves. I guess it statistically evens out, but it can be kind of infuriating with things absolutely do not go your way. Oh, here I have an extra mouse pointer. So, actual build priorities. We're not communists or anything, but we actually have a 5-year plan. Quick refits to light cruisers and heavy cruisers. Well, some aren't built yet, so we'll have to refit those once they clear the stocks. We will build a full division, meaning 4 ships of those 10,000 ton heavy cruisers. And this will cost around 7,000 for all 4 for 21 months. So when we look back to having 8,000 to build for, we can see that that doesn't add up. Or a full division of 4 light cruisers will cost just 4,000. So if we do 3.5 plus 2, that is 5,500. And then we do 1 or 2 battleships maybe. So let's start refitting and then order the heavy and light cruisers. Let's expand the docks, and then we will start building the battleships when we have the budget for it. We will just have to wait and see. We need to build up some funds in our little bank there. We need to have a reserve. So we cannot spend. We only had 61 million in the bank to begin with, so we need to build that up to a respectable level. And we have to see how our budget ends up within the next couple of years. And will there be a war with China or someone else? So I'm not sure we will have those battleships anytime soon, but it takes 2, 3, 4 years before we can actually start building them. We'll start building them then. And then Great Britain will have better tech, and then we can tweak and bigger docks. And then we could maybe end up with 16,000 or 18,000 ton pre-dreadnoughts with far greater capabilities. So we'll need to just see how things turn out. Cannot plan ourselves to that. So let's jump into the actual game and do some building. And finally, some actual gameplay. So before we start building the ships, we will do click, build docks. This will take 15 months. This is super annoying because normally it takes 12 months to expand docks, but for poor Japan it takes 15 months. Costs 1,070. But we have to start somewhere. And now it's just 4,500. Now we will, of course, mothball this Fuso, like we talked about, and all of these guys. We will initially reserve these. We have the option of mothballing a few of these cruisers as well. You can mothball up to half your fleet. Not more, but it would only save me like 100, 150, something like 200 at the most. I don't think even that much. If we sort of mothball these, we would save just over 100, less than 150. So not really worth it. So now we have set status. Research is at 10. We are not setting any espionage until the start of 1891 at the earliest, unless tensions become very high. So, with our 3 legacy ships still building, we have a little over 5,000. And I know that this is going to more likely than not increase to some extent, not necessarily all the way to 170, but it will probably be higher than 136. So we will have a little bit extra cash to play with. But let's find my ships, design ships, and load the sign template. And CL. And this is how I name all my ships. The light cruiser, it's designed in 1890. It has a name. doesn't need that tonnage tag. I just added those so I could make several variants of it. Here you can see it in all its glory. Like we talked about, with the 2 torpedoes and a decent enough, I would say, armament. So costing a little over 1,000 to build, so we will start by developing the construction. So immediately this becomes a problem because we don't have enough money to actually design it, so we will have to say no and come back to it later. But in just 1 month of saving, we can actually afford it, so it's not going to be a problem. We could start by refitting some of our ships. We could refit the ships of Division 5, for example. That's for Izumis. So I could rebuild this one according to the stuff that I already showed you guys, and it would cost us 850 for 3 months. So I think we could rebuild 2 immediately, and then we can save up the rest. I think that's a good plan, and then we can get the first design going. Yeah, I also name my divisions in this. I put BB div 4 because then I can sort on division more easily. And I use B for reserve divisions and A for primary divisions, or CS for the old or worn out cruisers instead of CL. Just a sorting measure for me. Same with the class here. I can easily sort on class. Yeah. So that actually concludes episode 2. We will have to postpone actual gameplay until episode 3 on account of runtime. It's closing in on 1 hour, or would quickly exceed 1 hour if we go into turn-based mode. So instead, we will conclude here, and for episode 3, we will go through 1890 basically, and see how far we can get. So I'm looking forward to that, and I hope to see you again soon.